Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. I never have really figured out what to say when I'm not stepping off the train or leaving my house. In this case, I'm leaving the library to walk home. Should I say, when I'm leaving the library? I kind of like that. I think I'm going to be pay more attention to fidelity in the second 500 episodes, in the next run of episodes, to see whether I like saying stuff like, when I pick up my recorder, when I leave the library, just make it very specific. I think I've done that in the past, but I'm going to be more diligent about it. Well, that's right. If I'm sounding reflective, it's because I am, dear listener. Hello. Thank you for joining me. This is the 500th episode of Pick Up and Deliver. That might not actually be true. We'll see. I was looking at the feed from my podcast service, and it says I have like 498 episodes or something, like not quite 500. And that makes me wonder if I miscounted somewhere. So I'm gonna have to go back through and see, did I miss an episode somewhere? I actually found one from a couple weeks ago that I had recorded and I posted on my website, but never uploaded it to the podcast feed. So if you got an extra one in the last day or two, that's what happened. I think I put a note at the beginning. So we'll see. This is ostensibly the 500th episode. And so I'm feeling a little reflective. I thought I'd talk a little bit about how the podcast is going, what I have in mind for the coming time. The long and short of it version is I'm not going to change much. I'm enjoying the way it's going so far. Most of the feedback I've gotten kind of says we like the way it is. So, which I guess makes sense if you're hanging around. If you've hung around for some chunk of 500 episodes, you probably like the way it goes, which makes sense. But I'll be thinking about that the next month. So if anything you hear this episode gets you thinking, head over to Board Game Geek. There actually is a forum called the 500th in the Board Game Geek thread forum for this show. There is a thread called 500th episode coming up or something like that. If you have suggestions or you want to say what you like or don't like about the podcast, or just let me know why you keep listening, I would be happy to hear that over in that forum if you don't want to direct message me or send it in some other way. I did want to take a moment to say thanks to John Knost, to Chris Graves, to Jason Keglowitz, to Gabriel Edge for reaching out on the forum. I appreciate all your comments, folks, and it means a lot to me that you have been engaged as you have. All four of those folks I just mentioned are regular listeners and posters in the forum. Also come to mind Chris Hickman and Wes Macon, I know are both regular listeners who deserve some listening or some nods, as well as my design partner Rob Huber listens regularly. And I think my mom does too. Hi, Mom. Actually, bringing up Rob does remind me, I told him I would make a correction. It's important. So a couple weeks ago, I mentioned a game that I had played called Bali, and I played it, and I talked about it coming from Goodwill, and it did come from Goodwill, but the reality is I played a much nicer version of it than that, because Rob got it from Goodwill, and he hated the graphic design of it. And so he actually laid out his own cards for it that were much easier to read. And those are the cards he brought with and that we played at Toggle Gaming. And so when I said what I said about playing Bali, I was actually not playing the commercial copy, which is worse, really bad. I was playing Rob's delightful copy. And I did not mention that on the podcast, and I should have. So, correction noted. Okay, so what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about the upcoming year as I'm hitting the 500th episode. I thought about doing some sort of grand retrospective and pulling clips and I don't know, blah, 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 blah. That kind of prep is not what this podcast is about, right? When you go for a walk with a friend, you don't have them spend a couple hours digging through the archives of your conversations in order to give you a highlight reel. At least I don't. So I'm not going to for you, haha. But I did do a little prep, so I thought I would talk about that a little bit. First off, I went and looked, and the last year on our podcast, I looked at the places it's been downloaded according to Spreaker, which is the podcast hosting service that we use. And aside from the United States, which is the vast majority of the downloads, we also have at least 10 downloads, which means that somebody, either one person listened to 10% of the episodes for the season, or 10 people listened to one episode, who knows. But some of these are way, way more than 10, but 10 was the cutoff. Here are the countries that have listeners to pick up and deliver this year. And I want to say thank you to each of them and hope that you'll join us again next year. We have Canada, India, Australia, the United Kingdom, South Africa, Singapore, New Zealand, Germany, Denmark, France, Greece, Spain, Norway, Brazil, Taiwan, Mexico, Poland, Belgium, Sweden, Russia, Netherlands, Chile, Israel, and Thailand. So thanks to all of my friends around the world who are listening to the podcast either once or 10 times or every single episode that I put out. At whatever level you find interesting, that's the level where I'm happy you are. Although, of course, I want you to listen more. So thank you for that. All right, there are a few things that I had in mind. I don't want to call these New Year's resolutions. That's not productive as a template or a genre for me. But I do think of them as something I want to try for the next year in my gaming life. And we'll see how it goes, because some of these, if you've been listening for 5 years to me now, some of these are going to sound a little familiar, but I'll talk about them anyway. The first one is I want to slow down buying games. Now, I will say, despite the fact that my collection size increased by about 10% this year, I have slowed down significantly buying games. I backed far fewer Kickstarters this year than I have in previous years. I bought far fewer games in retail. The big difference is I maintained and continued my habit and desire and interest in new games by increasing the amount in which I visited Goodwills. And that resulted in me acquiring new games, certainly. But, acquiring them for $3 a piece rather than $30 to $60 to $100, right? So the much more economical way of acquiring games. And it's got a little bit of a game to it itself. You're hunting for that great find at a board game store. Hues and Cues actually is probably my best find of the year, purely from a sort of finding a hot new game perspective. So that's, my acquisition amount has stayed high even as the amount of money I'm spending on games has dropped. That said, I do really want to recommit to that idea that I laid down last year, which is I really need to be cutting games out of my collection. And I do have a bunch of games slated to leave that are just sort of in a pile right now that I haven't taken the time to post. I may do that this afternoon depending how my actual schoolwork goes. But generally, the prospect of getting rid of games is really necessary. And I also need to take a much harder line in terms of games that we haven't played in a long time that I don't think I'm going to get back to the table because other people don't like them, or even just I know they're not as good as other games. Like, here's a game I think is fun, but it's not as good as this other game that I think is more fun. So why am I going to play A when I could play B? I'm happy to try new games, but once I've played them a couple times, they can go on the sell pile. So I'm going to try to be a bit more aggressive about that this year. The way I labeled that on my list is cull. So I need to do that. So concurrent with buying fewer games and culling games that I don't like as much, I really want to get back to playing more favorites and getting a bit more depth. I'm really enjoying the level of depth and engagement I get from games playing them on Board Game Arena. Having played probably 150 to 200 plays of Through the Ages now, the experience of that is really compelling. It's really useful to get an in-depth view of a game, and I want to do that with more of my tabletop games. So pushing for a little bit more of that this year, and I'll come back to that in a bit, but I do have a technique for trying to get some of those faves back to the table. That said, another thing I really want to do, I'm going to keep up my asynchronous play. I'm really enjoying playing lots and lots of games. I'll have some people that I get into a run with, and I'll play the same game over and over again several times. And I kind of like that too, because you get into a rhythm, you get to know the game better, and I find that really fun. Now that does threaten to make me too good at a game when we meet in person. That said, like when I went and played Agricola in person, even though I'd played it dozens of times with Kevin Berendt, Kevin, I think you're a listener as well, I wasn't all that good at it in person. So maybe that's not as big a worry as I make it out to be. But the value of spending a bit more time keeping up with those asynchronous games really fits, I think. The next thing that I'm looking to do more of, and I'm really excited about, is to do painting, model painting. I've mentioned this a few times. I think even 2 years ago it was a thing I wanted to try. I got a magnifying glass. I've slowly been acquiring stuff to do it. But this year I really pushed hard for it, talking with my wife about what kinds of stuff I'd like for Christmas. I talked about paints, and she got me a really nice paint set and some brushes. And so now I've got all this equipment. It would be a real shame if I didn't use it. But more importantly, it's, it is a thing that I've always enjoyed, and I would like to get back to it. And so having gotten these paints, I really want to start getting back to it. I did put a little pressure on myself in December. I finished painting all the zombies for Zombie 15, which is a project I've been working on for a really long time, just to get my feet wet and painting again. And then I took 3 years to do it. There are a couple more individual minis that need to be painted, and those are something I will do. That's the first thing on my list, but it should be like one afternoon to do the rest of those, because I'm not going to do them in super great detail. And then I need to pick the game that I'm actually going to put some effort into and paint with a bit more detail. And I'm thinking that I'm going to start with the Hellboy game. The advantage to that is that there are lots of minis, so I can get a lot of practice using this paint. And kind of like Zombie 15, there's a bunch of minis that kind of all just sort of serve the same purpose. So if they come out not looking the best, I don't feel too bad about it. And then as I get through the sort of generic mobs of minis, then I can go up to painting the characters, and that'll be a bit more detailed, but a bit more fun. But I really am, the paints that I got are the speed paints from War Painter or Army Painter. And so these are meant to be a much faster process than some of the other things I've used or paints. And so I'm looking forward to having that quick experience and having models that look really good. I'm also, really leaning into the idea that just start painting. And if it looks bad, you can always paint it again later. They have chemicals you can get that'll just remove the paint from it, and you can paint it again if you really want to. But having painted minis is way better. Even not the best painted minis is way better than non-painted minis. And what I have in a lot of my games now are unpainted minis, which is gross. So I'm definitely going to be jumping into painting more, and I'm excited to do that. I'm going to make that part of my top of the stack. I'm going to talk about what did I paint this month. Then you can hold me accountable if I haven't painted anything. Also keep an eye on my Instagram, which is Wombat929. I have been trying a thing where I'm taking a picture of every game I play, usually with kind of the box cover or the rule book in the foreground and the game board in the back, and just posting it to Instagram. So the idea is that, every day you'll get to see a picture of a different game I played, or a couple of them, whatever. So, if you follow me on Instagram, you can see those. They're not the most artistic pictures. They're meant to just be a record more than the fanciest of fancy things. But I will also post minis there when I paint them. All right, and then so this gets to the last thing that I'm going to do this year that ties back to that idea of playing more of my favorites, but it also ties to the problem I had this year and last year with the 10 for 10, is that I made it be a family thing, even if the family wasn't that enthusiastic about it. And they were fine to engage with it. They thought it was a fun idea. But then when push comes to shove, often they're just not into thinking about their gameplays the way that I do, meaning, really directing it with that kind of gusto. So I haven't, so then we had the last couple of years where we didn't make our 10 for 10. So what I thought I would do this year is we're going to take a break from the family 10 for 10. It's going to go back to being my 10 for 10. And instead of doing a pick 10 games, play them all 10 times thing, what I've decided to do instead is I've picked 10 designers and put them on my 10 for 10 list. And now every time I play a game by that designer, I'm going to mark it in the board. And once I've played 10 from each, then I consider that a win. I will also, in the digital space, if I play a digital game by that designer, I'll mark it with a half star. And then so I could make a 10 for 10 all digital, but it'll all be these half stars in the Board Game Geek with the Board Game Geek star display. Or each time I play a physical game by that designer, then I'll put a real star in. And so, it might be a mix or it might be all real stars if I've done my job. But I think that'll be an interesting way to explore this hobby in a different way, to remind myself of the things I really like. I've picked designers I really like. They're my favorites. And so, getting to try that, I think will be fun. Speaking of which, here are the 10 designers that I've put on my designer 10 for 10 challenge. Martin Wallace, you saw that come in. I'm going to name like 3 games that they did that I'm most excited to play again. Martin Wallace, so we've got Brass, we've got Anno 1800, we've got London. Vladimir Suchy, Pulsar 2849, I'm looking forward to playing that. Last Will, that's on my thing this month. And let's say, if I can get it before the end of the year, Woodcraft. Reiner Knizia, his games are up and down, but the good ones are really good. I love A Quest for El Dorado. I love Lost Cities. I love Through the Desert. There you go. There's 3 Reiner Knizia games. Then we have Inca Brand. This is really Inca and Marcus Brand, but Inca is the designer. Marcus helps develop and playtest. These are the Exit games, are the most of those of theirs that I play, but there are some other games as well. Rajas of the Ganges, the dice game, I believe is one of theirs. Village is a game I've always wanted to play. I don't have a copy of it, so that might be a hard one to get a hold of. Rise of Queensdale, I don't have, but again, it's supposed to be pretty good. They have a bunch of games. That one might be the hardest one to fulfill. So I'm probably not going to play 10 Exit games this year, but I want to try. I like her stuff. Then we got Phil Walker Harding, he of Barron Park and Sushi Go and Silver and Gold. Lighter fare, but still delightful. Next up we have Tom Lehman. This one again might be, especially digitally, easy to do because he plays Res Arcana. He made Res Arcana. He made Race for the Galaxy and Roll for the Galaxy. I really want to dig into Roll for the Galaxy. I've got 2 Roll for the Galaxy expansions that I've hardly explored at all. That's one I would like to get back to the table more, Roll for the Galaxy. Next up we have Elizabeth Hargrave. You know, I really, with the new Wingspan thing that came out, I want to jump back into Wingspan, play quite a bit more Wingspan. I also have a bunch of Tussie Mussy expansions that I haven't tried. I would like to try those. I'm sure that when the Fox Experiment comes out sometime this year, I will be itching to try that as well. I did not order it, so it'll be harder to get a hold of, but I'm itching to try it. And of course, if someone brings Mariposas out, I'll play that as well. Next up, we have Vlada Chvátil, he of Codenames and Through the Ages and Dungeon Pets. This one I definitely would get all the digital plays because I play Through the Ages so much. It might be hard to get 10 physical plays, but I would like to. I have a bunch of Galaxy Trucker stuff that I would like to play and a bunch of other games as well. So yeah, Vlada Chvátil, let's go. Uwe Rosenberg, of course. You know I love me some Agricola, but also A Feast for Odin is a top 50 game for me. I actually already played one, New York Zoo, we played yesterday, which is January 1st. So yeah, lots of Uwe games to play, lots of them to enjoy. And finally, this will be another hard one, Karl Chudek. Again, I can get a lot of online plays of this done. I'm not challenged with the idea that I might get those done. But I would like to play some games on the table. I got that Blood of the Northmen game that was pretty good that I would like to try a couple more times. I have a copy of Glory to Rome that I would like to play, but I haven't gotten played. And so I would like to try that. I mean, I have played it, Glory to Rome, but I want to play my copy some more. And then a GNC, I did back the Kickstarter for that. That should deliver sometime this spring. So I'm looking forward to trying that as well. So those are the 10 designers I'm looking forward to playing this year. So what are your 2023 gaming resolutions? Head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and share your thoughts in the forums about your plans for the coming year. What games are you excited to play? What games are you getting rid of? What other game-related goals do you have? Are you keeping a top of the stack list the way I do? Post a link to it. I want to follow it. I want to see what you're doing. But most importantly, I hope that this January brings a sense of renewal and a time for a new engagement with the hobby and a new enjoyment of everything that comes from or connects to gaming. In particular, I also want to say thank you for listening, sticking with me. This episode represents the end of my 5th season, meaning I've done 5 years of recording myself and walking around, and you people are listening, and I really appreciate it. We are a small but mighty group, and if you weren't out there listening, it wouldn't be any fun to do this. But because you are, because every now and again I'll get a message from you, or you'll post on the forum, or for those of you I know in real life as well, you'll mention something from the podcast when I see you. It sure means a lot, and I really appreciate it. So that's it, signing off for season 5. I will talk to you at the end of January. Thanks for joining me on my walk and all previous 500 walks. I'll see you in a month. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.